Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. And following up on the questions about January 6th, I know you've spoken to the decision by the White House counsel's office to tell the archives to hand over those documents. Has there been any concern or conversation about what might happen one day when the shoe's on the other foot, and if another administration of the other party comes in and says there's an extraordinary circumstance and they want to hand over documents that were deemed privileged by the Biden administration?
I can assure you, Ed, that this president has no intention to lead an insurrection on our nation's capital.
I anticipated that would be your answer almost word for word.
Oh, good.
But you can understand that you're opening potentially a Pandora's box here.
Actually, we don't see it that way. I understand why you're asking this question. We talked about this a little bit last week as well. I think it is ultimately important for people to understand and remember that January 6th was an incredibly dark day, one of the darkest days in our democracy. There was an insurrection on our nation's capital. What we're talking about here is getting to the bottom of that. Shouldn't everybody want to get to the bottom of that? Democrats, Republicans, people who have no political affiliation whatsoever. I will reiterate that we're going to assess and review, as is standard in the process, the documents and any efforts to exert executive privilege on a case-by-case basis. And we'll provide you updates on those as those processes proceed. And we will continue, as it relates to executive privilege for other issues, to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, as every White House has in the past. But I think if you look back at past presidents, Democratic and Republican, there isn't really a precedent for what we're talking about with this select committee and what they're trying to get to the bottom of. And the uniqueness of that, I think, is important context.
Okay, so some quick background. A few days ago, the Biden administration blocked an attempt by Trump to withhold documents from Congress related to the January 6th insurrection. White House counsel Dana Remus wrote, quote, "President Biden has determined that an assertion of executive privilege is not in the best interests of the United States and therefore is not justified as to any of the documents." Remus added, quote, "These are unique and extraordinary circumstances. Congress is examining an assault on our Constitution and democratic institutions provoked and fanned by those sworn to protect them, and the conduct under investigation extends far beyond typical deliberations concerning the proper discharge of the president's constitutional responsibilities. The constitutional protections of executive privilege should not be used to shield from Congress or the public information that reflects a clear and apparent effort to subvert the Constitution itself." And so now, the National Archives is authorized to turn over those documents sought by the January 6th committee, including those covering Trump's communications on January 6th at both the Stop the Steal rally and subsequent communications throughout the day. According to NBC News, that request sought everything from Twitter messages, phone and visitor logs, and any videos and photos of events he participated in. Which brings us to the typical question anytime any accountability is suggested, which is, well, what happens when the shoe is on the other foot? What happens if Republicans turn this against Democrats when they're in power? And the response is as simple as Jen Psaki pointed out. That's fine, because this president isn't going to incite an insurrection. So if Republicans feel the need to subpoena documents, go for it. Subpoenaing documents is only scary if you've got something to hide. Biden, not being one to try and have his vice president assassinated for not unilaterally trying to undermine the election results, probably doesn't have that much to hide. But the fact that Trump is falling over himself and trying his hardest to litigate this into oblivion shows that in fact he clearly does have something to hide. So no, for the umpteenth time, both sides are not the same. Now with that said, even though the Trump team's desperation to shield these documents is in and of itself a de facto admission of guilt, still they'll go to the wall clutching their pearls and pretending that this is all illegal and unprecedented and corrupt, which is ironic because, well, they're doing this in service of hiding documents that betray activities that are illegal and unprecedented and corrupt. But hey, if there's one thing we could always count on from the previous administration, it's hypocrisy. But despite how much they cry foul, this is all well within Biden's legal right. Federal law dictates that former presidents can ask current presidents to withhold any documents created during their administrations. But Biden does and did have the right to deny that request. And because he did, Trump is now obviously attempting to bog down and slow walk the investigation. But his legal challenges won't go anywhere considering there's already precedent from the Supreme Court. In 1977, SCOTUS ruled that the incumbent president is, quote, in the best position to assess the present and future needs of the executive branch. And while Mike Lindell and Judge Jeanine might still believe Trump runs the executive branch, reality isn't exactly on their side. And beyond that, even if Trump was still the incumbent president and was in a position to have a say on asserting executive privilege, that authority still isn't absolute. The Supreme Court has also ruled that executive privilege is limited to communications in performance of a president's responsibilities. And because the issue here is Trump's involvement in inciting an insurrection at the US Capitol, the very obvious argument could be made that such actions are outside the realm of a president's responsibilities. In fact, they're outside the realm of legality altogether, considering inciting an insurrection is deemed illegal in the US Constitution itself. So any way you cut it, Trump doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to asserting any executive privilege. Now, one final point here, the reporter who asked the question in this clip, Ed O'Keefe, also suggested that this might be akin to opening Pandora's box here. But again, no it's not, because this isn't just a matter of Democrats refusing to protect executive privilege of a Republican administration, as if it's just some petty partisan fight. All of this revolves around the issue of inciting an insurrection. That has never before happened, it shouldn't happen, it was unprecedented, and it was one of the darkest days in American history. Releasing documents isn't the issue at hand here. The issue at hand is a president who is sworn to protect the Constitution, inciting a rebellion against the country and that very Constitution. That's the unconstitutional part. That's the unprecedented part. That's the chilling part. That we're even talking about releasing documents as if that's the issue goes to show that still our press isn't prepared to grasp the gravity of what happened on January 6th, opting instead to present this as some false equivalency, as just one more daily battle in the never-ending beltway tug of war. But no matter how much the press corps needs to both sides everything into oblivion, this is not normal and it shouldn't be normalized. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.